Welcome to Bible Believers Fellowship and the ministry of bbfohio.com, a free Bible teaching ministry. I am Pastor Greg Miller, and all of our video and audio messages can be found at bbfohio.com and can be heard on our 24-hour internet radio station at bbfohioradio.com, where we invite you to visit and learn the King James Bible with us.
Man, very good. Leads into what I'm going to read. This is what I posted on my page, but also the church fan page and the private group we have. And it's an introduction to our study today. I'm just going to read it. The local church is a place to meet with like-minded Bible believers who have been saved by faith in the gospel of Jesus Christ, which is 1 Corinthians 15, 1-4. It is not a place to evangelize, though our emphasis is always gospel-centered. It is not primarily a place for behavioral therapy, though growing in biblical knowledge does affect our behavior. It is not a place for entertainment, although I'm very entertaining, I know. It's my face, it's a blessing. Although the singing, prayer, fellowship, and even the teaching can be quite enjoyable to a Spirit-filled believer. The fact is, the local church exists for the purpose of teaching the Word of God with historical perspective and contemporary application. It's not about you. And that's what most churches today will talk about, is the person in the pew. We are to be God-centered, Word-centered, and affected by what we're learning, but we're not the focus.
Right.
Bible Believers Fellowship, let me say, it's about God and His plan for you and for the world, as Sean mentioned in his prayer. It's about God and His plan for you and the world, and you are part of that whole plan. Bible Believers Fellowship is meeting this morning, and we'll have as our Bible study the biblical perspective on the Gaza war in Israel. We will lay the facts out bare-fisted, and all the cards will be face up on the table. If you hate truth, please do not show up. You won't hear that advertisement from very many churches, but that's the way it ought to be. You would not like BBF. If you love the truth but cannot show up, we intend on uploading this message in its entirety this evening. Stay tuned. Israel has been attacked by 11 missiles from Gaza in the amount of time it took me to post this. And this was supposed to be during an agreed ceasefire. That's what we're dealing with. Now, the bottom line is, my people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. Yes. And it's lack of knowledge that is causing people to take wrong sides on things. And it's because, one reason is because they go to church and they never hear the truth preached. The other reason is apathy. They don't open their own Bible, they don't read the Bible, they don't study the Bible, and they don't look at the world through the Bible. And that's the main issue we're dealing with. There is a war in Gaza. Now, some of you may not realize that. You say, who? You'd be surprised. There is a war in Gaza. And the question is, why? And here's an explanation that I'm going to let somebody else give to you in just about a 5-minute amount of time.
When I did my graduate studies at the Middle East Institute at Columbia University's School of International Affairs, I took many courses on the question of the Middle East conflict. Semester after semester, we studied the Middle East conflict as if it was the most complex conflict in the world, when in fact, it is probably the easiest conflict in the world to explain. It may be the hardest to solve, but it is the easiest to explain. In a nutshell, it's this. One side wants the other side dead. Israel wants to exist as a Jewish state and to live in peace. Israel also recognizes the right of Palestinians to have their own state and to live in peace. The problem, however, is that most Palestinians and many other Muslims and Arabs do not recognize the right of the Jewish state of Israel to exist. This has been true since 1947, when the United Nations voted to divide the land called Palestine into a Jewish state and an Arab state. The Jews accepted the United Nations partition, but no Arab or any other Muslim country accepted it. When British rule ended on May 15, 1948, the armies of all the neighboring Arab states, Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, Transjordan, and Egypt, attacked the one-day-old state of Israel in order to destroy it. But to the world's surprise, the little Jewish state survived. Then it happened again. In 1967, the dictator of Egypt, Gamal Abdel Nasser, announced his plan, in his words, to destroy Israel. He placed Egyptian troops on Israel's border, and armies of surrounding Arab countries were also mobilized to attack. However, Israel preemptively attacked Egypt and Syria. Israel did not attack Jordan and begged Jordan's king not to join the war. But he did. And only because of that did Israel take control of Jordanian land, specifically the West Bank of the Jordan River. Shortly after the war, the Arab states went to Khartoum, Sudan, and announced their famous 3 no's: no recognition, no peace, and no negotiations. What was Israel supposed to do? Well, one thing Israel did a little more than a decade later in 1978 was to give the entire Sinai Peninsula, an area of land bigger than Israel itself and with oil, back to Egypt, because Egypt, under new leadership, signed a peace agreement with Israel. So Israel gave land for the promise of peace with Egypt, and it has always been willing to do the same thing with the Palestinians. All the Palestinians have ever had to do is recognize Israel as a Jewish state and promise to live in peace with it. But when Israel has proposed trading land for peace, as it did in 2000, when it agreed to give the Palestinians a sovereign state in more than 95% of the West Bank and all of Gaza, the Palestinian leadership rejected the offer and instead responded by sending waves of suicide terrorists into Israel. Meanwhile, Palestinian radio, television, and school curricula remain filled with glorification of terrorists, demonization of Jews, and the daily repeated message that Israel should cease to exist. So it's not hard to explain the Middle East dispute. One side wants the other dead. The motto of Hamas, the Palestinian rulers of Gaza, is, "We love death as much as the Jews love life." There are 22 Arab states in the world, stretching from the Atlantic Ocean to the Indian Ocean. There is one Jewish state in the world, and it is about the size of New Jersey. In fact, tiny El Salvador is larger than Israel. Finally, think about these 2 questions. If tomorrow Israel laid down its arms and announced, "We will fight no more," what would happen? And if the Arab countries around Israel laid down their arms and announced, "We will fight no more," what would happen? In the first case, there would be an immediate destruction of the state of Israel and mass murder of its Jewish population. In the second case, there would be peace the next day. As I said at the outset, it is a simple problem to describe. One side wants the other dead. And if it didn't, there would be peace. Please remember this. There has never been a state in the geographic area known as Palestine that was not Jewish. Israel is the 3rd Jewish state to exist in that area. There was never an Arab state, never a Palestinian state, never a Muslim or any other state. That's the issue. Why can't the one Jewish state the size of El Salvador be allowed to exist? That is the Middle East problem. I'm Dennis Prager.
And that is exactly it.
That's it.
And folks, it's not intellectual, it's spiritual. This country, the media, our schools are controlled by unbelievers. They do not believe in Jesus Christ. They do not believe that Bible is the Word of God. And because of that, they don't even understand their hatred for the Jews. It's not intellectual. Now, the current conflict that's on the television screens today was started by Hamas. In 17 days, over 2,350 rockets were fired by Palestinian terrorists into Gaza. 2,350 350 missiles attempting to kill civilians. And there's idiots here in America who say that Israel shouldn't be responding to that.
Really?
Yeah. It's because they're under the influence of the devil. It's not intellectual. This is my statement. I'm quoting myself. Any honest, red-blooded American worth anything will admit that if this were to happen to the U.S., we would demand an even greater response to Hamas than what we've seen from Israel. 2,000 missiles coming at Columbus, Ohio, you would be demanding their destruction. And you wouldn't care about the pictures of children and women they're putting on there, because you would know they're doing that on purpose to get their kids killed to use against you in propaganda. And that's a fact. None of us like war. Any of you know me, I haven't been a war hawk. I like what Johnny Cash used to say, I'm a dove with claws. I'm against war. War's a racket. But a nation does have a right to defend itself. Defensive war is a war you should support, and we'll see that in a minute. And people ask, what about the innocent men, women, and children killed by Israel's response? I'm going to let the son of one of the founders of Hamas answer that question in less than 3 minutes. This man that you're about to see interviewed on CNN is the son of one of Hamas founders. And he got saved. It changed, yeah, it changed everything.
Joined now by Musab Hassan Youssef. He's the author of Son of Hamas, and he joins us live. You know, your father was a founding member of Hamas, and you were groomed to take a leadership position. Eventually, you converted to Christianity, rejected their political and military objectives. Why did you do that?
Well, for the simple reasons that we see right now in Gaza, that Hamas does not care about the lives of Palestinians, does not care about the lives of Israelis or Americans. Mm-hmm. They don't care about their own lives. They consider dying for the sake of their ideology a way of worship. Mm-hmm. And how can you continue in that society?
Okay. I'll ask you the same question I asked my last guest. Can you coexist with someone whose mission is your destruction?
Well, Hamas is not seeking coexistence and compromise. Hamas is seeking conquest and taking over. And by the way, Israel, the destruction of the state of Israel is not Hamas' final destination. Mm-hmm. Hamas' final destination is building the Islamic Khilafah, which means an Islamic state on the rubble of every other civilization. Mm-hmm. These are the ultimate goals of the movement.
Musab, you say in your book that Hamas targets civilians as a tool of war. Tell us about the Hamas that you know from growing up in the West Bank.
Well, in the mosques, Hamas taught us that without shedding innocent blood for the sake of the ideology, we won't be able to build an Islamic state. They were preparing us from the age as young as 5 years old. This is the ideology that Hamas was feeding us. And honestly, it's impossible almost for anybody to break through and see the truth of and real face of Hamas and be able to leave at some point. As you see in my case, I had to lose everything just to say no to Hamas. And today when I look at the children of Gaza and I know what they are fed, I know that they have no choice.
Yeah. Musab, thank you. Appreciate you joining us. Next time we'll spend a little...
Now, his dad was one of the founding members of Hamas, and when he got saved, it all changed. And now he's going around telling all these dumb Gentiles here in America, listen, this is the reality behind Hamas. They want the Jews dead. Now, I want to emphasize this, in spite of a few exceptions like that previous interview, American news media cannot and should not be trusted. It's just a fact. And if any of you have listened for a while or attended here for a while, you've seen example after example that the The majority of those in the news media are what you might call nominal Roman Catholic. That means they probably don't even go to Mass, but they identify themselves with the Roman Catholic Church. Well, they have a tendency against the Jews and for the Muslims. And it's been that way forever. And that's just the reality of it. This, I believe, this came to mind, Psalm 73:8, when it comes to our media. Read that with me. They are corrupt and speak wickedly concerning oppression. They speak loftily. Think about that. Their excuse for being against the Jews' defense of themselves is they accuse the Jews of oppression. They speak loftily. It means that they're not telling you the truth. And that's the reality that our media is today. Here's an example. This is what's going on. Hamas attacks Israel, and then Hamas attacks Israel, and then Hamas attacks Israel. Israel defends itself. In the news today, Israel attacked Gaza. Hamas rockets by the thousands and very little news about it. I went around at work, where I work, and I went around to folks that I know, and I would mention it. I'd ask, did you see what's going on in Israel? No, what's going on? They're not stupid. The reason they didn't know is because the news media wasn't covering it. People didn't know what's going on. Mass media in America condemns Israel while ignoring Hamas rockets and their use of human shields. Look at the little babies in this room. Look at the little kids. They purposely hide rockets in their schools so that when Israel attacks that, kids will be killed. They do it on purpose. They purposely, when Israel has dropped leaflets by the tens of thousands saying, get out of this town, go outside of town. And the news media say, where are they going to go? Outside of town. It'll be over in a couple of hours. They can come back. Sadly, some of them will have to come back to a home that's been blown up, but it's because Hamas uses their homes as shields. It's immoral. It's satanic. And that's what's going on. This is how Hamas fights. They send over a death to Israel missile, and they use the kid as a shield. That's exactly what's going on in Israel right now. In this clip, we're going to show you an animated illustration of how this works in less than 3 minutes. It's a little cartoon. And I'm telling you that kids have more sense than most adults these days. They could watch this cartoon and tell you clearly who's right and who's wrong. Most adults these days, they can't even tell you that. Let's watch this. That's what's going on. Sometimes you just have to defend yourself. Now, you can go back and Google the news reports and you can see this whole thing unfold just exactly like you saw it in that little cartoon. So the question is, do Christians support war? The answer is yes, whenever it is a defensive war. And if you don't support defensive war, you got a problem with God. The psalmist said, I am for peace, but when I speak, they are for war. It's just a fact. Israel has bent over backwards, and if all Hamas has to do is not attack, not send missiles, not kidnap soldiers, not kill their teenagers, everybody seems to have forgotten about that, there would be no war. Israel constantly comes to the table for peace. Now I want to throw this in free of charge. This is all setting them up. They can't get peace no matter what they do. They're going to be so desperate that when the Antichrist shows up, they'll buy it.
Because they're tired of fighting.
That's right. And they're tired of trying everything under the sun for peace and it blowing up in their face. So all this is playing into the big plan. And here's what's going on at the peace table. There's Kerry in the middle. He says, could you at least meet him halfway? And his demand is that all Jews are dead. How do you meet halfway with somebody whose demand is that all of your race is killed? It's impossible. Yeah. Now, God established the government of Israel to protect its own people. Now, there's a lot of, I want to use the word idiot a few times this morning because there's a bunch of idiots in America, and a lot of them are preachers. And they're telling people that because some Illuminatists and some Masons and those people were involved in the founding of Israel, that means that God wasn't behind it. Nonsense. God used a pagan nation called Babylon to run them out of their country. God used a pagan nation called Rome to run them out in 70 AD. The first time was 586. But God also used a pagan king named Ahasuerus to preserve them from Haman when he was going to kill them all. God's constantly using pagans. And He'll continue. He's even going to use the Antichrist. So wake up, Flippy, out there teaching this nonsense, and it's so ridiculous. God establishes government. He says so in Romans chapter 13 and verse 3. He says, for rulers are not a terror to good works, but to the evil. Wilt thou then not be afraid of the power? Do that which is good, and thou shalt have praise of the same. Pretty clear. Verse 4, read it with me. For he is the minister of God to thee for good, but if thou do that which is evil, be afraid. For he beareth not the sword in vain. For he is the minister of God, a revenger to execute wrath upon him that doeth good. That's very simple. There are good... What?
Evil.
Doeth evil, I'm sorry.
Alright. Oh, I'm going to play this. I'm going to give it to you.
Again. to